computer on. All right, you're live.
Hello, listeners, and welcome to today's episode for Human Design for Parents and Educators. This is the show that empowers parents and educators to nurture the children that they love. We're your hosts, Jessica Ann and Sashya Clark,
Hi.
and we are going to be focusing on the 6-2 profile and kind of talking about how you can create a nurturing and supportive environment for your 6-2 profile to step into their sovereign self-expression and move through the world embodying their unique design.
Yes. I'm so excited about this episode because it's all about the role model, right?
And you're our resident 6-2
Right.
adult. So let's begin. I'm just going to give a little bit of an intro about why it's so exciting to have a 6-2 child, and then we'll go into our session. So the 6-2 is a child who is bringing a deep leadership and inspiring transcendence and authenticity. The 6-2 has naturally innate gifts that they call you to notice and seek them out. Stay tuned to find out all about how to nurture your 6-2. So in this episode, we're exploring how to nurture the 6-2 child to fulfill their potential. And the 6-2's highest realization of potential in this lifetime is threefold. And we're going to kind of chunk it. We'll start by chunking it down. So if you knew that your 6-2 child's trajectory, and we spoke about that in a previous episode,
Right.
was to become a wise leader who came to show humanity what it meant to live as a role model according to one's own internal truth, how would this knowledge transform your approach to supporting your child to reach their potential? So, Sashya, let's begin by breaking down what are the actual qualities of the 6 line. We'll break it down first with the 6 line.
Sure. So the 6th line is a triphasic profile, which means it had much like I always compare it to the life cycle of a butterfly, because you have this caterpillar stage. I have long before I knew human design, I got a butterfly tattoo on my leg because I'm just fascinated with them. But so the caterpillar stage is really about like trying everything, like a caterpillar, like sampling this, sampling that, and they're willing to put anything in their mouth. They don't swallow everything they taste, but they definitely are willing to try everything. And so it's much like the 3rd line in that first phase, where it is a lot of trial and error. Things that they like, they do more of. Things they don't like, I didn't like that experience, maybe they don't do it. They tend to really kind of be a little bit wild and adventurous in that first phase, and it usually lasts until about 28 or 30. I really came off the roof. It started at 28, but I felt like I was finally off by 30. So, but it's related to the Saturn return. And that's a term from astrology and human design. And then the second phase is much like the cocoon of a butterfly, where they're very much dissolving all of the I mean, a caterpillar literally dissolves its entire frame of its body, and then rebuilds the new body, the wings and everything, with the genetic components of the first stage of their life. So everything that you've acquired, all those experiences in the second phase on the roof, then we really try to process internally and make sense of it and learn from them, or maybe even discard some of them with some forgiveness, so that we are able to then come off the roof in the 3rd phase and emerge from this chrysalis as a butterfly that's really modeling this victory over life circumstances, this ability to kind of rise above what's happened or the different things that we've lived through. And then we can turn around and be a wise role model, a guide, a template, if you will, for the community around us. And maybe, I mean, I know famous 6 lines that wrote books in their 3rd phase of their life or became presidents or whatever. So like who knows what the third phase it may have nothing to do with any of the experiences from the first 2, but the things that we can do to help people in those new roles are basically the internalized lessons from the second phase.
Amazing. So you've broken down that the 6 line profile, whether that's a 4-6, a 6-2, however,
Mhm.
a 3-6, all 6 lines have this triphasic life phase. And so
Right.
to just recap, there are 3 sections. 0 to 30, you're operating like a 3rd line
Yeah.
experiential learning, and building the foundation of wisdom to become that leader later on. The second phase is 30 to 50,
Hmm.
and they are shifting into a new learning style where they're detaching and
Yeah.
witnessing instead of being right in the fire. You've described it beautifully with the analogy of the caterpillar. I'm going to have to use that in my work as well.
You're welcome to it. I didn't make it up. I borrowed it from someone else. Well,
And
I
they,
connected it to 6'2" myself, but the whole idea of people anyway, never mind. Motivational interviewing uses the author of motivational interviews uses butterflies in his imagery a lot. So
fantastic. So they integrate and embody everything that they've gathered from that first phase. And then in that Chiron return from 50 till death,
yeah,
that's when they really step back out off that roof into that leadership role where they can serve humanity. But really, unlike the fifth line, they're not here to teach how to be authentic. What they're
right,
here to do is role model and lead by that example.
definitely.
And that's
And
when they, yeah.
oh, I was going to say a lot of people have commented that while I'm on the roof that I come across kind of aloof, or I don't know if they mean like not I'm not snotty, but just like I'm a little unapproachable.
Mm.
And so that's totally an energetic thing because I'm a very friendly person. I just that it was very difficult because I'm pretty outgoing. When I first got on the roof, it was very difficult for me not to get involved. I just wasn't invited, or people weren't engaging with me as much. People weren't asking me to do things. I've always been called a natural leader, and suddenly nobody wanted me to lead anything. And I'm like, what is going on? This is so weird. So it was a little disturbing at first. I also have the left angle cross of the alpha. So like to not be in a leadership role for a bit was very weird for me.
Wow, amazing. I didn't realize that about your incarnation class.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay. And let's just break down a little bit of the qualities that we expect to understand around that two line, and before we come back to the 6-2 as a profile. I think it's really important for our listeners to
Yeah. The two line is second line is human design, right? Traditional human design calls it the hermit, which just it's kind of an introverted feeling. What it really means is that that we need that people with a two line, whether that's a 2-4 or a 6-2, that they really need some designated downtime in between interactions with people, especially in leadership roles, but in any role, just peer roles or family even. And Karen Curry Parker calls it adept because the two line also has like a lot of latent talent. I mean, tons of talent just inherent born into them. Go ahead.
yeah. No, the 6 line is the adept and the 2 line is the responder.
Oh,
And
did I get
that's
that backwards? Hi, you're right. Okay, so the respond anyway, what I do know about two lines is that they tend to have a lot of latent talents, no matter what name you call them. And so it can actually, they get a little bit of projection. We haven't gotten into the fifth line yet, but when we talk about projection in human design, we're not talking about psychological projection where like I feel guilty about something, so I'm projecting onto you that you're doing it. It's more projection of expectations. And so the Ra talked about it always being like this movie screen. And so we kind of project, we see talent in this two line and we project an expectation onto them then because of that talent. And so what that can look like for parents and educators is a lot of pressure. Like, so for example, my one of my children is very talented at almost everything he tries, and so he's getting pressure from other people to take on a leadership role in his baseball team. But so there's been they want him to be a pitcher, and there's been a pitching like practice gear out in our backyard for about a year now. And if he was really passionate about being a pitcher, he would be out there every day pitching. He wouldn't need me to remind him. I mean, he's passionate about playing cello, and I have hardly had to remind him to practice. I mean, he's still only 10, but he 90% of the time goes and practices because he loves doing it, not because I reminded him. And so we were talking about this. He feels this pressure from his team to try out for this traveling team. And so what I told him was, just because you have a talent in something doesn't mean you have to make a career out of it, right? You can just do something for fun. And that's really a validating message for a line two, because it can get really confusing to have so many different things you're talented at and not like how do I choose which one of those things to pursue to mastery?
Mhm.
It can be very difficult, and then feeling pressure from other people, those projections of, oh, you're so good at science, you should be a surgeon, and you should go to medical school, and oh, you're so good at in music, so you should be a rock star or whatever. Like there's just a lot of external pressure to do something that's gonna, somehow we have this belief that if a talent of ours makes money, that it's more worthwhile. And I just don't think that's true. I think sometimes the universe creates kids that just like to have fun doing lots of different things.
Yeah, I
So
think that's I
yeah.
think it's the case for all children and all adults.
Hmm.
Like if we really surrender to our passion and what really lights us up. But I just want to add a few things for the about the two line as well. So the
Yeah.
way I see the two line and speak to people about it is the two line is what we call the natural in
Yeah.
traditional human design. It's the natural because it's everything about the two line is effortless. They have these
Right.
innate talents. They don't need to develop, like they don't, unlike the one line who has to dig deep and really study and build that mastery, their talent is often innate. Not to
Hmm.
say that they shouldn't build mastery. So I was really interested when you said that, like, which one do I choose to
Right.
build mastery? And I think that comes back to that hermiting time where they get lost in their passion
Hmm.
and follow what lights them up in there, and that gives them the access to their genius as well. But I think what one of the things that's really important for us as well as educators to recognize, or even parents, is that on one side you've got these people pressuring and projecting on their talent, say, oh, you should do this and turn it into money and monetize it. But on the other side, the two line may not know what they are innately good at and what, so they might think I have
Right.
to work really hard and act, and they don't let them go out and let it be easy,
Yeah,
because
exactly.
playfulness, childlikeness is all about the two line. And I think at this point we should probably talk about the aura of the two line. Do you want to mention something about that?
Sure. The aura of the two line, again, it is really about taking time, allowing yourself time to be lost in a book or lost in a piece of music or whatever, it is a disconnect. I think of uh some of the great writers of our time that basically went and got a cabin out in the woods to finish their book, and that it's really this hurt, like disconnecting for a bit, not forever, that would be really selfish, but for a bit, like taking off and being with yourself and your own thoughts, and letting yourself kind of diffuse everything about your life. I think we as a especially the education realm, I don't think we allow enough time for kids to diffuse and let that brain just kind of make natural connections in the resting rather than in the focus. So
Yeah, and I'm building on that. So you're really focusing on this need for like to allow them to be lost in their own world
ge-
and their own genius and their own
yeah.
magic. But I was thinking about really reinforcing to them the way the aura calls, gets
Hmm.
them out. So when they are in alignment with their design, whether they're a projector, invitations will come, they will be called out.
Right.
People will say, oh, hey, I remember Sasha's really good at parenting for human design,
Hmm.
and you'll be the one at the top of the head because that two line will call them when you're
Right.
open and ready. Yeah.
Yeah, no, you're right. I forgot about that. I mean, I I live it all the time, but I forgot. Like the way Ra explains that is, it's almost like if you've been out hermiting long enough, like if you've really been doing a great job of resting and enjoying your time to yourself, your aura literally starts setting up like a smoke signal or a beacon of some sort that says, "Okay, I'm well rested. You can invite me into something, or you can give, if you're a generator, the universe, I'm well rested and totally done exploring my passions." So, I mean, for the two line, they kind of almost get on the verge of bored right before that happens. Like there is a little bit of it, the signal inside of me, what it feels like when I'm just about to get an invitation is like, okay, I feel thoroughly renewed and a little bored. Like I think bored is the right word.
Mm.
Not apprehensive. There's no anxiety to it. It's just like, huh, okay, well, what am I going to do next? And then that invitation will come. I'm a projector, so it's always about the invitation. But if I was a generator, something to respond to, like hey, I'm going to the park. Are you busy? Like it's, which isn't really an invitation, or they might see somebody that they haven't seen in a while. And yes, the universe will line up that next encounter that's outside of my hermit time or the second two lines hermit time in order to call them out. It's basically like a phone call. Like the universe rings you up and says, "Okay, you're done. Come on out now." So,
Hmm. I was just thinking then as well about this idea of being called. I feel like the two line also gets called into their passions. So it's
right.
not just physically people calling them out. There's this big thing about being called into their thing. So again, I think or maybe it wasn't in a few sessions ago, but this is something we may talk about quite frequently of what should my child do for college or do at school. And
Right.
I think with the two line, you can actually allow them to follow what they get called into.
Oh, yeah. And again, for the two line, it would be the thing that they are passionate enough about that they're willing to invest time into mastery. Like I'm not willing, I mean, there's things that I like, I love watercolors. I'm not willing to invest the kind of time it would take to be a master at it, but I'm really excited about using these watercolor um colored pencils that I have because the effect on the paper is very similar to watercolor paint, but it doesn't take half as much training. So,
Mm.
and I can just use my artistic talent, if you will, that innate talent that's
Yeah.
in me to just create something for fun that makes my soul happy. So, um, it's like, yeah, I guess I don't know how to say that without sound. I'm not sure if I'm being clear about it, but we really do tend to look at kids that have a lot of talent and say, "Oh, wow, you need to be in gifted and talented, and then you need to practice to be first chair in cello, and you need to this, and like we try to set them up on a trajectory to use that talent to take them to a really high skill level because the talent's there. And I do agree that any talent that is worth pursuing needs some discipline or structure with it. Like there is something about the practice sessions and them learning the mastery that's good for every human being, no matter what type you are.
Yeah.
But I really just want to resist parents and educators from making every one of their passions that particular kind of discipline because they if they aren't lit up by it, like if their soul isn't calling them into a long-term commitment to that, then we're really making taking the fun out of it for them. And I think fun's super important for kids.
Yeah, 100% agree. Okay, so the 6-2 carries the gift of wisdom. They are very old souls. So when we're bringing in now the whole of the, so they have a capacity. One of their fullest potentials, that they get to have if we can support them early on, is to live out their own internal truth from their own internal authority. So if you knew that, how would this transform your approach to supporting your child to fulfill their potential?
I'd like to actually let you answer that question first. I think you have with your educator experience, I think you have some wisdom to offer us about that. So first of
Well,
all, I know I just asked you to answer, but first of all, like 6-2s are not the only wise profiles, right? But so it's not that, so you have wisdom to share with us too.
no, absolutely. Okay, right. Well, this really rings my bell because everything in my whole life is really about helping people to connect with their authentic truth and their sovereignty, which is why I love human design as a system, especially the wider we can get this knowledge out so we can live in acceptance of who we are as we are and allow people to be who they are and be who we are. And so number one, I think the sixth line more than any other line needs to learn to live their design. So what is their unique inner authority? For me, I'm a splenic projector. So learning to trust my intuition. So I think the foundation is how can we help all of our children develop
Mm-hmm.
self-trust? But for the 6-2, who's going to go through life and become that authentic role model, learning that early on is going to be a life-changing thing. So for
Totally.
me, you're a mental projector, so you've got soundboarding as a strategy to connect with your inner authority, but you've also got clairvoyance and other things that are within the chart. So understanding, reaching out to us, having a reading if you don't know, or going to find out what is my child's inner authority and how can I allow them to use that to make decisions and develop self-trust as much as possible. Um, the other thing I would look at is looking at their open centers and identifying where their vulnerabilities might be. So we're not going to go into depth about the centers, but If they have an open will center, we know the thematic here is about self-worth, self-esteem, seeking to prove themselves if they're in the not self. So if you're a 6-2 child with an open center in the will center, how do we help that child develop a sense of worthiness and self-esteem? And there's
Right.
many ways we could do that, that's so this growth mindset thing. Then again, we're thinking about this core theme of leadership. So what kind of tools can we help children use to develop self-leadership? So developing the ability to ask powerful questions of themselves.
And others. Yeah. I mean, you and I have a love for Socratic questioning, right? And I actually think that because we keep talking about how the new paradigm of education. And so two things that you've said that I really want to piggyback on because they're amazing. Um, First is this intuitive, I believe we're moving into, I was kind of playing around with the term student-centered education, which is similar to like an individualized education plan, right? Like, or an IEP, but that in sometimes the way the system couches that, it almost is like, well, there's something wrong with you, so you need an individualized education plan. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm just talking about like, let's take the soul and the chart and the personality and the skills and talents of the person in front of us and see how we can best,
Mm,
what kind of environment can we create to best nurture that.
yeah.
So the phrase I kind of went to bed with yesterday as I was chewing on preparing for today is, I almost feel like it's going to be intuitive or soul-led education. That's the new paradigm we're moving into, is really removing from our mindset that some expert, somebody that's got a PhD in education, not that I have a problem with people with PhDs, but just because they said in this book that you should do it this way with the ABC and then the XYZ, then I put that template onto the child I'm teaching and go, what's wrong with you that this system isn't working for you? you know,
Exactly.
and instead saying, you know what, I intuitively can tell this is not working for you. And what's going on inside me, I'm listening to my inner authority as the teacher, how I can sense that if I just did it slightly different, you would really get it. And then changing that without feeling guilty or some sort of mental torture that I'm getting off the curriculum, you
But
know?
I think this is really, I mean, this is the work that I've done, like I have set up in schools, and it requires high quality educators. It
Yeah.
requires people that, because there's teachers that go and do a job, and then there's people that are born to teach, and they are what we call, they will find many different strategies to help the child um to
Yeah.
approach a question in a different way, or they will be able to they will be able to respond to the need of the child because they've got such a deep evidence-led
Yeah.
practice behind them, and they're passionate about it. And so what I was thinking was, this is an entry level issue,
Hmm.
actually, in terms of the education.
Oh,
So
totally.
yeah, I
Well,
mean,
and I actually, and even some of the, whatever you said, not master style teachers, I think when I was fresh out of college, I wasn't that in tune with my own intuition. So they could become master educators with a little bit of coaching from
yeah,
administration and other mentors to listen to their own, like, one of the most beautiful gifts I was given when I first started doing counseling was that I kept sitting in groups with this girl that was training me, and I would try to copy her style of counseling. And she pulled me aside one day and sat down with her little cup of coffee. She always had a cup of coffee, even at like 8 o'clock at night. And she said, you're going to find your own style. Stop
mm,
trying to copy everyone's style. You do, just be, you're assuming that I'm an expert because I've been doing this so many more years than you have, and you're trying to do it like me. And I just want you to know that every single counselor has a different style, and you'll find yours. And I trust that you'll find yours. And that's a message administration, um, you know, seasoned teachers can tell newcomers that just got out of college, like, you're going to you follow the curriculum the first year and then spend the summer reflecting on what you liked and what you didn't like, and you're going to find your own style the second year, but just trust the process. The curriculum's there for when you don't know what to do, not for when you do intuitively know what to do, right?
yeah.
I mean,
Mhm.
like, I kind of take curriculum even as a homeschooler as like a guide. Like, these are kind of the, I don't know, if you're going to go on a journey, let's go say we're going to go visit Spain. These are some of the points I want to stop through, and I want you to experience this, and I want you to see this, and I want you to remember this, right? But how we get there might change based on circumstances. If there's a rainstorm and we were planning to be outside, we might put that to a different day, so so
Yeah.
it isn't much different than a tour guide really. And so like even in math, like I need you to understand the concept of long division by the end of this year. But there's many different routes we can take to that mastery. And if this route isn't working right now, we can take a break and try a different route.
Yes.
It is
100%.
a it is about just like learning to trust yourself as the guide or as the educator too. Like I
Mm.
really think that's really what separates good teachers from wonderful teachers, is that good teachers second guess themselves a lot, and wonderful teachers, the anxiety about whether or not I'm a good teacher is really gone by then. And they're
Yeah.
like, some of that just comes with experience, I think. What do you think?
No, it's absolutely experience. It takes time, and I do think it takes 7 years to master.
Yeah.
Like,
That's
like,
true.
yeah,
Yeah, they
yeah,
have too much student debt to be practicing that long. They need to just start. But like the best classroom to learn how to be a teacher is the classroom.
yeah.
Totally.
So in terms of developing self-leadership as well, another thing that I think would be really valuable is to model it, obviously yourself,
Hmm.
developing the ability to work with their emotions in a conscious way.
Yes.
And move away from the blaming out, emotional intelligence is something that's going to stand that child in good stead. So
Right.
modeling it, and doing, and yeah, and allowing them to develop those skill sets is really valuable.
Now,
Um,
do you know if in the UK, they're starting to teach some emotional intelligence things here in the United States, at least in our school district. Do you know if they're starting to teach emotional intelligence?
I think there's the beginnings of it. We've had, I mean, again, it depends on the school, it depends on the
Yeah.
quality of teaching, it depends on the community that the child's in. There's so much. I've been in schools where the teachers have no emotional intelligence, and so
Yeah.
they cannot teach emotional. They're not
Right.
modeling. It's trauma based, and so this is why I think we spoke in the first session. The importance of really building a new paradigm is that partnership between parent, educator, desire to create the new, and go within ourselves to lead by example, all of us leading by example.
Right.
Because if you've got parents shouting at kids and you've got a culture of punishment and this and that, you're not going to teach emotional intelligence. You're just going to create shame and fear and authoritative, punitive approaches, which is not helping it. It's what we see
Right.
mirrored. I don't want to go too far off topic, but we see this mirrored in leadership, in government, in all of these things. So the whole society is mirroring the shadow. And until we can, like, one by one decide that we're going to make a change, and we're going to, one child at a time, give that child that love and all of that thing, that's how we're going to see that ripple transform into the wider society.
Yeah, totally. And if you're listening to this podcast, you are totally part of the solution, not part of the
Yeah.
problem. We are so glad you're here. Like it does. It takes a lot of one of us. One of us can stand for this, then we can inspire the next person. But if don't worry that you're just like, sometimes I think, well, I'm just one person, but it takes a lot of ones to make a big change.
And it's not about perfection. We're not
Mhm.
saying don't be human. We're saying that,
No, the opposite. We're saying, please be human. Stop
yeah,
following the program. Be human. Be upset when you're upset. Just don't yell at your kids about it.
yeah. And moving forward, what they then become, when they become the role model, what they're really here to do is show humanity an alternative to the propensity to abandon
Mm,
oneself for an outer authority. So again, it comes back to what we were saying earlier, that we are going to nurture our 6-2 profiles to fulfill that fullest potential. The earlier they can connect with their own design and critically, and this is the thing, as an educator in my classroom, I trained the children to critically evaluate the information that was being presented to them, not to accept things at face value. I was actively teaching critical literacy and critical thinking skills, which isn't widely taught. A lot of schools are just getting kids to repeat past exams, da 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 da. So for a 6-2, part of their education, that we can really support them with as parents and educators at home, is developing critical thinking and critical.
absolutely. Yeah, like I said, that's kind of where I was going when I brought the Socratic questioning up too. Like I think that we've kind of left behind some of the beautiful skills that were inherent in classical education models, that there, back in a time when you couldn't Google everything, you had to memorize a set of facts, which I'm not against memorization, but I think it has its proper place, because once you have that schema of memorized information, you can build upon it a dialectic understanding of a concept. And then you get into the rhetoric stage where you, as a team, and some of this, when I first learned about classical education, I'm like, it works so well with children's developmental styles anyway, their developmental trajectory anyway. Because when you have a child that's like kindergarten, first grade, second grade, they do parrot back to you a lot of facts. My mom told me this, or they pick up a new vocabulary word because I cussed in front of them one day, and then now they're repeating it everywhere, embarrassing me. They do parrot back a lot of facts at that age. So that's a great time to memorize a schema of information that they don't have a desire to have. They don't have any questions about. They're just taking it in and spitting it back out. That's a normal place for that part of the process. Unfortunately, I think that the education system spends too much time in that same process. So by the time they're in fifth grade, they get kind of pushy. They want to push back. Well, why is the sky blue? Why do we have to do it this way? Why is long division this step then this step? I don't understand why we have to do it that way when I can just do it in my head. And they start asking questions. It's a huge sign when they push back that they want to take more control, more responsibility for their own education. So give it to them.
Yeah.
Instead of fighting them and forcing them to a test and memorizing more stuff, give it to them and have those conversations where I'm asking you questions. Okay, well, how would you solve this problem? Then show me on the board. And, then I sometimes set up my two boys and have them both solve a problem because they have different ideas, my two older boys. And then I ask them each to defend their answer, not in a argumentative way, but like, okay, you did it this way. Why did you think that was the best way to do it? And let's compare that to why he thought this was the best way to do that. There is so much learning that their brains can do just trying to figure out for themselves
Yeah.
why they think that their answer is the best answer. And sometimes they find out they're wrong. But it's their process that they're doing. And so because it's theirs, they internalize it much faster than if I just said, no, that's wrong. Do it this way, that because I said so. And then
Well,
they get into teenage years, which this is the rhetorical stage, right? And anybody who's ever had a teenager in the house will tell you that they think they know everything. And so we should adjust our educational model to let them teach a little bit, let them research something, follow their fancy. Social studies is social studies, but if they're super, fascinated with Napoleon, do a deep dive on Napoleon, come teach the rest of the class about it next week, and harness them, give them a platform where they can use some of that natural rhetorical impulse inside of them to share what they're learning with other people. So,
well, again, I'm just going to say I 100% support that. And in my in the school that I developed and in my classroom, this was a practice that was rolled out across the school that every
nice.
child, but with the modeling of good teaching pedagogy underneath it as well, which made it even more powerful because then the children understood the metacognitive process, the thinking steps with the structure that behind it. Yes, they can go and do a deep dive, and that's also great. Anything to get kids teaching each other and
Yeah.
thinking, which is what we mean by metacognition. What are the thinking steps? But when you, as an educator or the practitioner, can actually help guide show them, okay, well, this is how we create powerful questions, and here's how we might develop questions that understand or questions to clarify or whatever it is.
Mhm.
And then they create according to the pedagogy, then they actually understand, it improves their learning as well as their own teaching.
Right. And I do have one more thing to say about that before we move on to the next point, because I know there's going to be parents listening to this too. They're like, yeah, teachers need to know this. Okay, but parents, you're not off the hook either, because we often at home over homework have the power to teach kids how to take responsibility for their education. And I don't know that we always do, but just like arming them with I'm just thinking little Johnny comes home, he's frustrated with his long division, so he has questions, and maybe I answer them or maybe I don't. Maybe I don't know the answers if I'm a parent. That's possible too. But teaching them, like, write your question down, because I think that would, maybe there's other kids in your class that have a question that's very similar to yours but are too scared to ask, and that's putting the educational process in back into their hands, because in that dialectic stage that's really what they're striving for, is like, I need to feel some responsibility and sovereignty over this process. And it feels too much like you're in charge when I just have to parrot facts back to you. So that's where the resistance is coming from, is really a desire for some independence. And
Mm.
so, and that's my psychology major coming out at me now, right? So we can harness that though by saying, you know what, you're right. That's an excellent question. I think you should write that at the bottom of your homework or on a sticky note or something. And when that question, when the opportunity in class comes up, ask your teacher to help explain it again, because maybe other people didn't get it too, and maybe she'll explain it in a new way that will help you. But don't be afraid to ask good open-ended questions of your teacher, and really just encouraging that dialogue between the teacher, you know, because they're teaching a lot of kids. I'm gonna give them the benefit of the doubt that with 20 to 30 kids in the class, they don't always have time at the end of that lesson to take questions. And so sometimes and they're going to be so well, flattered that for a student to come in with a good question about their math. I know they will be. I'm a teacher. I love good questions, especially well thought out questions, not like, why do we have to do this? But like, can you explain why you have to carry the one down when you're doing long division? Explain that concept to me, because I don't think I'm getting it. That's a
Mm.
great question.
And that's really important because it's methodology. So they
Yeah.
should we should be explaining it.
Yeah, but I mean, there's a good, like you said, like not all questions are good questions, you know.
Yeah.
When I was when I was in the first phase of my life, I used to ask why a lot of the universe. Why is this happening to me, to the universe? And I don't
Mm.
think I ever got a good answer. Why is not a great question most of the time, but what are you trying to teach me through this? What am I missing? How can I react better? What's the process? What's the big concept here that I get the process, but I don't understand the bigger concept. Those are better questions. So
But actually, I think you kind of just touched on the next kind of phase. But what you've just said kills two poor old birds with one stone. Poor birds, because you're saying how they could use that in their learning context, in a school and academic situation. But actually, that's part of the building the self leadership and the reflective practice, because a 6-2, when they go on that roof, and also as a 6 line, contemplation is going to be important for them. So being able to ask effective questions to help move them into understanding instead of a victim mindset of why is this happening to
yes,
me, which is what I was hearing from you. You were saying, okay, moving away from the why into what am I trying to learn from this? And that,
yeah,
yeah, and suddenly that puts them in a really powerful position to from their 3rd line phase take the wisdom and be able to move forward. Um,
totally.
and this links with um, we may or may not agree on this, but when I look at Ra's material, and there, we understand from quantum human design as well that each profile does have a shadow
Mhm.
and can live in the shadow side. Sorry, my eyes a bit itchy. I think it's hay fever. Um, let's let's frame the next part. If the highest expression for a 6-2 is to move through the transformational pathway from pessimism because of the trial and error and the experimentation and the crazy things we get into as 3rd lines, because it's actually part of our learning style,
Right.
um, to move from the potential of pessimism to optimism. If if we could develop the mindset skills and resilience to prepare them to actually move into an empowered growth mindset very early on, what you're saying is super key.
About learning, like adjusting the question. Yeah, if I'm not getting a good answer, that's uh, listen, this is just like if I could tattoo one thing on everybody's arm, okay? The phrase would be, if I'm not getting a good answer from the universe, I could try asking a different question. that's
Yeah.
that's just like my mantra in life. If I am not, I mean, it's true for Google too. If I'm not getting the search results I want, maybe try modifying the question, you know. Not to say that the divine is Google, but the point is that sometimes we are literally getting a shitty answer because we're asking a question at a lower vibration, and if we move the vibration up, we would get a better answer. And if we really come at it without a victim mindset, like you were talking about, and really release that question from any like blame and really have a curiosity, then we get a great answer back. And so that's just, again, my from experience. We talked about journaling in a different session, but I want to bring it back here too. I think that the 6th line does need
Yeah.
space and privacy for all of you parents, total privacy to really just because it's an internal process to take what's happening to me and articulate it and then reread it or reflect on it in some way that's a real personal contemplative process that will help your sixth line process the experiences. I kind of would for the third line and the sixth line, what if we treated their personal journal like it was their science journal? Like, I haven't published any of this material. I'm still experimenting with it. And so it's very private. It's meant to be in but it's the reflections on what happened in the lab today, right? The lab of life. And so yeah, in my home state, we have a University of Okoboji. If anybody's from Iowa, you know exactly what I'm talking about. University of Okoboji. It's actually not a university at all. It's a collection of lakes that but people wear these sweatshirts that say I graduated from the University of Okoboji, but what they're really saying is I graduated from life, that I have lived. Like, the University of Okoboji is a metaphor for really learning from the life experiences and treating your life like it's, you know, it's a lot of trial and error. And what could I have learned from that? We talked in one other session too about reframing mistakes. I think that's one of the best ways to really nurture a sixth line is just, I don't think that was a mistake. If you learn from something, that's a message, a validating message you could give a sixth line child is like, okay, that really, I can see it's hurting you that you made the mistake. I feel like you're disappointed. Those are all feelings though. It's only a mistake if we don't learn something from it. So take some time to process it or journal about it and see what lessons you can glean from it.
That's beautiful. The phrase going through my mind is the Tony Robbins quote, which is, "The quality of our lives depends on the quality of our questions."
Oh yeah.
And I really support what you say about developing a journaling practice, teaching them how to access their own inner wisdom, which goes back as well to that first part of not just teaching them their strategy and their own authority, but how
Right.
do I actually trust and build that self-trust? Well, and
Mhm.
trust my own internal, like not abandon myself to an outer authority. Well, you're going to develop your own knowledge and your own sense of identity and values and etc. by learning how to go within and to
Yeah.
retrieve that information. So journaling is key, modeling think alouds,
Yeah.
um, reflective practice. So you've already touched on many great questions, but three things you could say, and well, I don't know, we do that again, but what have I learned? How will I use it? What will I
There you go.
adapt differently? Um,
Oh
and
yeah, that's a great question. I learned from a coach. How will I adapt and do it differently? When you're a coach on the softball field once said, if you could have that play back, how would
yeah,
you do that differently? I love that question because you're already, you're kind of already beating yourself up for missing the play anyway. But what a great way to harness that reflective I mean, you're sitting on the bench beating yourself up anyway. So why not say, if I could have that play back, what would I have done differently? And you're already emotionally charged. Anytime we're emotionally charged, we tend to remember those lessons a long time. And so if you're already emotionally charged, rather than sinking it back into the long-term memory under, like you said, the cloud of shame and disappointment, you can, if you turn that into you're right, if I could take that play at second base back, here's what I would have done differently. Suddenly I feel empowered to I'm ready to go in and play that play again too, right? I have confidence I know how to handle it differently. I have confidence that mistakes aren't totally breaking the whole team, and I'm ready to experiment with a different way of solving that problem.
And I think that you mentioned, I love everything you said. And I think that what I loved as well comes back to the keyword curiosity,
Hmm.
developing curiosity for life, for themselves. And that thing about really reframing failure, and another phrase that might linger in your minds, it's something that lingers in mine as a third line, is failure is feedback. So there's no such thing as failure. Failure is just literally feedback because it's
Totally.
alliterative. So yeah.
Oh,
All
and
right.
I want to jump on that too, because I think when we talk about emotional intelligence, I say the same thing. Feelings are feedback. I understand for emotionally defined people that when they're having a wave, it feels very much not like data and very much like an experience at that moment. But when they're beyond the wave and able to reflect back, it does become like a good feedback loop, a biofeedback loop of like, how could I have approached that situation different? So, I mean, especially with people with gate 36, happen to be talking about gate 36 a lot this week. Sorry, I know that's not what this particular episode's about, but it's so much related to expectations that we can sometimes trigger a wave inside of ourselves of disappointment because we had a whole bunch of unspoken expectations in a situation. But anyway, I won't get too off on the bunny trail about that. Yeah, anyway, teaching emotional intelligence is super important. We could probably do another series just about that. And
Right,
maybe we should. I don't know. We'll
yeah,
talk
I
about
think
it.
so.
I mean, it's because, like you said, this is all about the new paradigm. It's about teaching people to really teaching ourselves and our children and the children that we have in our classroom to really be human and to have the whole human experience, and yet make space and be intelligent with their boundaries so that other people can also have. I mean, just because I'm having a wave doesn't mean I have to have a meltdown too, right? So like emotional intelligence is just about honoring what's actually happening inside of myself and other people in a way that's affirming and life-giving and not destructive.
100%. Um, what does aligned success look like for a 6'2" adult?
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a great question. Well, first of all, I just want to uh, speak about the obvious. There will be a trajectory to leadership in the first phase that will suddenly stop. It almost always suddenly stops for people. And then right around the Saturn return, the first 28-ish, and that to help get them onto the roof. And so when kids are not aware that I mean, they're not kids anymore at 28, but when we're not aware that that's happening, it can feel like I've really messed something up so bad that I'm now being asked to step down or whatever. My husband and I were involved. My husband's also a sixth line, and so is my little brother. So funny because I'm a 6'2" projector, my husband's a 6'2" generator, and my brother is a 6'2" manifester. And so it's really my inner nerd loves watching like we're all 6'2s. We all have the same triphasic process, but it does wear a little different, like a loose garment. My brother wears it a little different as a manifester, and my husband wears it a little different as a generator, and I wear it a little different as a projector. And so but what we all have had in common is that we've had a major like life change right around that 28 to 30-year-old age. And for me, I and my husband both, we were really invested and involved in some volunteer work, community work, and we had a conflict right about that time. I had a conflict, and we both stepped out of those positions, and we ended up got married right around the same when we went on the roof, which was kind of beautiful because we both really spent a lot of time. We had 3 more babies, and we've spent a lot of time really being at home with each other in the roof stage, and not he has no desire to do much outside of our home life right now because it's work and kids and baseball games and stuff. And it took a lot more for me to surrender that, because as a projector, I know I'm here for the other person. And I also have a left angle incarnation cross, which is transpersonal. He's a right angle and he's a generator, so he doesn't have to do anything for anyone else if he doesn't want to. But and I've always said, like, if you want to know, we study ancient texts together, right? If you want to know what the Torah says about something, ask me. But if you want to see what it looks like, watch my husband. He's like the embody. He doesn't regurgitate all the information, but he's embodying it. And so and we our kids too, I noticed the boys a lot of times I can use how their dad acts as an example for them, a role model type of example. Like, well, what would your dad do if you were in this situation? And he's kind of one of my textbooks I can refer to. Um, because sometimes I think just hearing it from mom is not enough for kids, right? So anyway, the coming off the roof, I don't know much about that yet. I'm about to do that in a couple of years. I've heard other people say it's kind of just about as disruptive as going on the roof is, but I don't think it has to be. And I trust, actually, because I know human design and because I'm really practicing the art of listening to my own authority and being centered with the universe and having that relationship with God, if you will, whatever name you call that. I feel confident that even though it might be disruptive energetically, because all change is disruptive, it doesn't have to be traumatic. It doesn't have to be upsetting and then I've also been listening to other six lines. It is kind of like an identity shift too. Like who I thought I was in my first phase is not who I think I am right now. And I'm pretty sure I'll have a new idea of a new hat to wear, maybe in the last phase. And I also, the last thing I want to say about this, and I know I've been talking a long time, sorry, but the last thing I want to say about it is that I think there's a relationship with the identity thing and the G center. I don't think my brother and my husband, who both have defined Gs, I don't think they have had quite the identity shift in those phases that I have, because they have a defined G. So it doesn't matter what role they're playing, who they are is pretty consistent. Does that make sense? Whereas I can sometimes over-identify with the role I'm playing because I have an open G, and it's like, oh, finally an answer to who am I? You know, I'm a mom, but I'm not only a mom, I'm also a soul, and I'm also a mother, or I'm also a wife, and I'm also a friend, and I'm also, I mean, if you take all of those roles off of me, I'm still I'm still a valuable, worthwhile person just for existing. I was created, and so therefore I have value. So like it's easy for someone with a completely undefined G center like me to over identify with the role changes that happen in the three phases, and then that causes part of the upset with the role change, right? Because like, oh, who am I if I'm not playing that role anymore? Who am I going to be? What's going to happen to me? So I hope I'm going into the next disruption with the wisdom of the role doesn't define me. I am who I am, you know, and I'm a very fluid person, so I can play lots of roles. It's okay.
I don't know because I am a defined G and I'm also not a six line, but I think in terms of authenticity, if we actually just get to the root, it's am I living in integrity to my
Right.
own values? And if we cut away the roles and the identities and all the things and the illusion and facade, the six line, what am my role? What is my value? And do I live in integrity to those things on a physical
Absolutely.
level, a resource level, a moral level, an ethical level, emotional level? Yeah.
Yeah, that's so wise. That's exactly right. Yeah,
Mm.
that's how we know who we are. Is am I behaving in accordance with my own values right now, or am I letting some outer authority dictate how I should behave? Exactly.
Mm. Mm. Right, we're on to the juicy final question.
Okay.
You are a 6-2 mental projector. Your husband is a 6-2
Yeah.
not mental, just generator. And your partner is a
Emotion.
6-2 manifestor. Who's
My
emotional?
husband's a 6-2 emotional generator, and my brother is a 6-2 emotional manifester.
Okay. So if we had a time machine and could go back
Mm.
and thank your parents for something that they did well, what would it be? Or
Okay.
yeah, I was going to break
No,
it.
no, I can ask that. I love that question better than the question I was asking before. So, see, we've evolved together. I was asked, I used to, Jess knows that in my podcast for human design for parents and kids, was always asking my guests, what's one thing you wish your parents could have known about human design and done differently or better? But I love, since we're moving into this new paradigm, I love taking really the things we did like about what they did and carrying that forward. Because when you're learning the lessons of the past, especially for 6-2s, you don't want to discard the things that went well. That's part of the scientific lab notes too, because we want to keep recreating those results by copying what they did well. And I don't believe, okay, listen, human design's great, but I don't believe that it precludes any other spiritual enlightenment that's ever happened. So there's plenty of wisdom in other ancient texts, and there's plenty of wisdom our parents had and our grandparents had that they learned from their own spiritual experience here as a soul on earth, you know, a spiritual being in a physical body that they tried to pass on to us whether we were ready to learn it or not. So I love that you rephrased my question, and I'm glad I'm going to change it from here forward from now on. It's so you can just scratch the old question out. So what's one thing I know from that all three of us had lots of time alone. And I used to feel really bitter about that because of my open G center, because I was craving attention all the time as a kid. But as I've processed a lot of my own understanding about my second line, especially, um, I now understand that whether my mom knew it or not, or she just was busy working. My husband's parents both worked also, so we were all latchkey kids in the '80s, and we spent a ton of time alone. Or my brother and I were not alone, we were together, but and my husband had an older sister too, so we were together alone, but like the point is that we had a lot of social interactions without our parents hovering, you know,
Mm,
and we'd go play with the playground, the neighborhood kids. I, my mother passed away a couple years ago during COVID, and may her memory always be up for a blessing, but I know that she always felt bad that we were home alone a lot too, but I can say confidently now that because of that trial and error part of us that we were in that first phase, we really did need, it became like a social lab. And my brother and I are both very good in social situations. We moved a lot, and so we're also really good at meeting new people. My husband stayed in the same neighborhood his whole life, but he got, again, he was on his bike in the neighborhood. He had a lot of time to, trial and error different things in his friendships and in his understanding of how the world works and how other people work, that he didn't have to necessarily learn those things in college for the first time, or the first time he went out without his parents with their car. And so I'm not saying that we didn't all still make a big mess when we were teenagers, because we did. All three of us did. But the point is, I just think that that's one thing they did well, was that they gave us plenty of space and time to really do those experiments in that first phase. That's the third, like a third line. With and The other thing I think they did well, oh yeah, that also, because also all of that free time gave us time to explore some of our passions and have that hermiting time. I really believed I was a complete extrovert until my mom passed away. And then I suddenly needed to be home alone a lot, like just like not even talking, and to process my grief. And that's when I really got in tune with the second line hermit energy. And now I intentionally put myself in situations when I am starting to feel like it's been enough, where I can just diffuse and let it go and process it a little bit and just be. So,
Mm, really great point. So the two things, freedom and
yes.
freedom and space and
Yeah.
time. Wow.
Now, I would say, because the world is not like the 80s anymore, I would say one way to balance that freedom with the responsibility of a parent is to just be available. Like, if they, all kids nowadays almost always have a phone, or at least my boys, if they're away somewhere without me, one of them has a phone. And so instead of giving them the complete freedom, like, don't call me, and because my parents would never let us call at work. So we were kind of really on our own. And I don't know, so I would modify it for today's parent, because I don't think today's parent would be comfortable leaving their kids alone for 3 hours, not knowing where they are or how to get a hold of them. I do still think it's wise to give them space, but then always just know that there was a study once where they put these guys in a room for like 90 seconds, and they were overstimulating them with like flashing lights and weird noises and stuff. And the control group had no red button to touch to get it to stop, and the other group did have a red button that they could touch to make it stop. And the kids with the red button, all, not the kids, it was adults, they all lasted like 45 seconds longer in that overstimulation than the other group did, because they knew they could press the button anytime. And so I
Yeah.
really try to use that as a paradigm for my parenting. Like, do my kids have a red button where they could tap out if they started to get uncomfortable or overwhelmed, or they were having an emotional wave and didn't want to, beat anybody up? Do they have a way out? And so that's, I guess, for parents that are listening, I would definitely temper the any kind of free ranging with, make sure they know how to get a hold of you if they need some help, or if they, and I always tell them, if anything makes you uncomfortable, if so your guts, your intuition is telling you something's wrong, just call me and I'll come pick you up with no questions asked. So,
Yes, I love that, and bringing it back to the beginning of the session where we're saying really explicitly get our children to learn how to trust their intuition.
yes.
Okay, so this was a really amazing episode. Just to wrap up, if you want to contact any of us, Sashya is on Instagram at Sashya1,
Mhm.
SASHYA1. I am on Instagram as the HD Business Blueprint, or the HD Biz Blueprint. And you can catch me on YouTube. Subscribe to my channel, which is at Be the Expert with Human Design. Do you have a
Yeah.
YouTube channel that
I
you need
don't
to
have a
talk?
YouTube channel, but this will be on our podcast, that episode 2, human design for parents and educators. Um, and we'll put all that in the show notes for you too. You don't have to scramble that down while you're driving in your car.
Right.
So thanks so much, Jess. I'm really excited about this project. It's been so wonderful. I've already learned so much. I'm in so much good refresher. So
Yeah.
this has been so fun. Thank you so much.
It's so expansive. And this is the other thing about the new paradigm. You know, if we can get people young people, adults, teachers, parents, everyone collaborating, building partnership, sharing wisdom, sharing knowledge, connect,
Yes.
collaborate, create, purpose, partnership, prosperity. This is what it's all about, altruism.
Yeah.
Going out in those communities, being the village, raising the whole, all of us, and educate to elevate, my
Yes,
thing.
totally. I love that. You're so inspiring. I love it. I hope you have a wonderful day. And
I
for
am. I'm gonna go
we'll
get
we'll
naked
be
in the
back
sun.
again in your earbuds in a week or so with another episode.
Okay.
Take
Mwah.
care. Bye.
Bye.